Like, what did you do on your date?
Um, oh man, you did just throw me a loop. I the first day we did axe throwing and then we did golfing. So that was fun. I'm a competitive person. I like active things. I like sports. So it was a good date for me. It was an ideal
Did
date.
you win? Did he let you win?
Oh, they can't do that. That would not be that would not go well for me. No, but actually like that's the first time I ever golfed or like swung a golf club. So I
Oh,
was getting
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then
Okay.
axe throwing, I won. Yes.
Why
Yes.
do you
It was
seem
fun.
like the sort of chick that would excel at axe throwing? But
Is that a knock? I'm not
no,
sure.
in the nicest possible way. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm Brody Ibox.
And we are your professional misfits, and we're joined today by a third misfit. Say hi, Jules.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up? So, Jules, we know you from LinkedIn, but maybe for the misfits at home, you want to describe like who you are and what you're doing here.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm here, man. You just wanted me to come on
That's
the
fair.
episode. No,
That's
but
fair.
I met both of you on LinkedIn. We've had some good conversations. You guys are hilarious and I like your banter. I like your posts and you're out there and that's awesome. But I'll tell a little bit about myself. So, got on LinkedIn because I left education and wanted to get into tech. So that's kind of how I started my journey on LinkedIn, and just started posting a ton of content because I wasn't getting a job just sharing my resume. So, and then I started meeting a ton of different people online through networking, and that's how I met both of you. So,
What are you technically doing now? Because I know it like LinkedIn reads as sales champion. I'm like, bitch, that could mean anything. So like, what's and it's one of those catchy LinkedIn titles. Like, I'm a sales rock star. You're like, come, bitch, please. But yeah,
well, I actually need to change it all, but I'm just being lazy. So, but yeah, I work in customer success.
right.
So I work with the customers after they purchase our software and make sure that they get value from our tool and help them throughout their entire subscription. So that's what I do.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's the Jules introduction, misfits,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because today's topic we're talking about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. In this final little episode of the arc of season 2 and relationships. So we're talking about personal relationships, and this is the last little mini episode in this arc. And we really wanted to get Jules on. Super cool chick, number one. Number two, she's always in my DMs going, "How's your date?" and making fun of me. But and even
Always in
though
the DMs.
you are always sliding into my DMs, man. And this is like, your accent is weird. Like, I can't understand you. I'm like, okay. But this is definitely a conversation that we wanted to have with another female. So to start with something simple, like toxic masculinity, like, we know it's a thing. It's clickbait at the moment, and depending on which side of the feminist fence you're on, you can hate all men, or like all of masculinity is toxic for whatever reason. So let's start with a really simple question, and like, what is toxic masculinity to you, or how would we define it? And Brody, just to be nice to the guest, I'll push you under the bus first.
Yeah, I think it's every episode. I'm ready for it.
Good man. 20
Um,
episodes in, you finally got the hang of it. Yeah,
Just now. It literally
Just
just
now.
clicked. I was like, okay, you should be used to this. Yeah. Sheesh, God. I was worried about this episode because I have so much, I want to call it conditioning that makes these conversations difficult for me to have my authentic opinion come to light without worrying about what someone's going to think or the way that they're going to portray it or say it. So it's just weird to be in the seat now and you're like, oh shit, we're on,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's interesting. I thought about it a little bit coming up to this episode, and with toxic masculinity, I think there's this kind of culture that's being bred in young men that's like, you have to believe you're better than, and if you don't believe that, then you're not masculine. And there's that, to me, is the toxic side of it. I think you need to believe you're capable. I think you need to believe in your own strength. I think you need to believe in your own experience. But there's humbleness to be had there as well, that I think makes you a man. And this toxic masculinity that everybody talks about and parades around is kind of the guy just toting the flag saying, I'm the leader, get behind me or get fucked. And and that, to me, where it's wrong, right? Like,
Right.
that's not leadership in a nutshell anyways. And that's how I see it. And that's the side of it that I view as toxic, because it just comes off as ignorant, and it really is self-centered. You know, there's not a lot of the other party or the other person or the people in your life involved in that train of thought. And that's just a weird fucking thing to me. It's selfish, and like I said, it seems very arrogant to assume that you're gonna be the fucking savior of every situation. You're gonna be the driving force behind every solution. You're gonna be the only person that people can come to. And like, it's like, yeah, you could strive to be so, but there's also a healthy way in my eyes to do that doesn't revolve around kind of taking down the people that are around you that aren't on that same level. You hear like brokies or terms about simps and shit like that, and it's like, dude, come on. Some of you guys are just pure assholes. Like, I would rather hang out with a fucking simp than a dick like you.
Yeah.
So it's weird to try to put a definition around it, because to be honest with you too, I've been exposed to it quite a bit, over the last few years with this health journey stuff and like trying to get in shape and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen the really healthy side and the companionship of, trying to be masculine and be a role model and be a leader. So it's a weird bag, man. It's a weird bag. It's like the same things that I would label it as toxic are the same things that I would strive for in a healthier light or different perspective. But it's like, how do you define it? You know what I mean? If they both kind of walk on the same path.
Yeah, and that's sort of where you need to start. And Jules, this is what I'll ask you, because obviously you'll have a take, but it's also, I think it's interesting to note that in a lot of circumstances, anything that women feel they don't like in men, they'll label as toxic, as this sort of reflex. So before I put words in anyone's mouth, like, I'm really interested to get like your point of view on what's toxic masculinity for you, and if you've even experienced it, like, because you date guys, so you date more guys than we do. So
I have a question, actually, though.
Yeah,
like, where did this term come from?
That's a fucking great question. I don't know. And if like, I
do a
don't
little Google
know.
search in the background and see if Google has something for
Go
us.
on, but I'd reason it wasn't from men.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
I only laugh because that seems so clear, right? Like, it really.
Right. Because and again, not to jump too far ahead too quickly, but normally it starts with engendered patriarchy and like all of the systems, and then the culture that they breed, and then toxic masculinity that feeds into this patriarchy, X, Y, and Z. So it seems to be this semi-logical, weird pseudo structure of this is how all of these things come together, which seemingly women and feminism are not a part of and absolved from, because it's it's the patriarchy, therefore all men, and toxic masculinity, which is only relevant to men. And so we'll talk a little bit about, like, is there such a thing as toxic femininity? But yeah, so do you have a definition? Have you experienced it? What is it for you?
Real quick, coined by Shepherd Bliss in the 1980s during the mythopoetic men's movement. I'm not 100% sure the gender of Shepherd Bliss, but I'm about to find out. So you guys answer, Julie, please.
Yeah.
So I feel like it depends on like what your definition of masculinity is too.
Mm.
You know, so I don't think that I've experienced toxic masculinity. I don't know if I even like firmly believe in that, but I would say in terms of masculinity, what I think it is, in my eyes, is, and then maybe this is kind of, I think I've heard like some of this from, you know, like if men are supposed to only be this way, right? Like they're only supposed to be the leaders, they're only supposed to like protect, they're the one that needs to make the most
Warrior,
money in
provider.
the house. Like
yeah.
I think that's where this comes from, like on the women's side, where they think that they maybe feel like they can't fill these certain roles or be those roles in relationships, you know. So I think it maybe stems from that. That's my perception of it. But for me, I'm more traditional, so I like that role for men, right? So I like the masculine role for men. I like that they are leaders. I like that they protect. But I also think that like I fill some of those roles too, right? Like I think it can be in like tangent, if that's the right word.
Yeah,
Or like
yeah.
it can be it can be like similar roles. But I also think I think it's your definition of masculinity too. Like, but I think where men can get lost in this is like they only can be strong all the time. They only can be protectors all the time. They can only be, you know, leaders all the time, where maybe they think they can't express their emotions, or that's, you know, that's something that's challenging for them, or they can't share that they're maybe struggling with something. And I think that's where this masculine stuff can maybe go sideways, I guess, with some men, because it's just like they're the drivers, you know, like they're the determined ones. They're trying to achieve, and then, you know, it's just they feel like they have to hide that or suppress those emotions. And I think that's where some of this, like, I guess I kind of like segued, but like, you know, men, there's like this depression in men, or there's, you know, men are struggling. We talked about this, Chris. So
Yeah. You did, yeah. So one of the yes, we did. Thank you, because so Jules was in my DMs last week, and she bounced me this article on the loneliness epidemic in men, and she's like, what's your take? Because like it's hot right now at the moment in terms of there's a whole bunch of stats going around about men between a certain age, I think between 30 and 50, or even like late 20s, but definitely 30s to 50s, are much lonelier now, not either not having a partner or close friends, basically, that they feel that they can share in. Like loneliness isn't contingent on friends and partnerships, but it is a factor. But what was interesting was the clip that Jules sent me, and correct me if I'm wrong, was actually from a man saying this is kind of ridiculous, and it's a gynocentric view of men. Like men don't need to express their feelings. What men need is purpose. And Jules is like, thoughts? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, strongly disagree. But that's something that will come up here. Just so in terms of definitions of toxic masculinity, yeah, I think so. For me, like apart from being 6 foot, I don't really tick many of the other masculine boxes. You know, or sorry, being 6 foot and having a penis, I don't really tick many of them other men. You know, I'm in the arts. I speak a couple of languages. I give no fuck about sports. Like I'm active, but I don't follow anything. I don't care about any team. I don't drink. I don't take any drugs. Yeah. So so arguably, I'm more of a Renaissance man, which is an interesting thing because Renaissance man, by definition, was defined by the period where the Renaissance, this is what masculinity was. Like you danced, you spoke languages, you could write, you were cultured, you knew how to dress, like all of these sorts of things.
You were well-rounded.
Well, in in that respect, right? But then take a Renaissance man and like put them into the middle of the Hunter Valley where I grew up. Like, you are, no wonder everyone thought you were gay, right? So,
Fair,
but so
fair.
so what?
No, I get it.
Right. So there's a. It's fair. It is obviously logical and fair to say that, to Jules's point, like, how do you define masculinity? Because like for the boys in the football team, it's going to be one standard, right? But for the corporate bros, it's going to be another standard. But for like Brody to the dad, of 5 young boys, probably a different standard, and
Right.
and and the city and the country and these sorts of things, and even cultural differences between Australia and the US, and and let alone all my friends in Europe. There's different standards, so it's the discussion of toxic masculinity kind of becomes ridiculous, because it's like, which men and what are we talking about, and why are we talking about men at work, like in the workspace, like, Jules doesn't have a voice because, just go and make me a sandwich, sweetheart, and take some notes. Like, is that what we're talking about, or what's it going to be? But what you both identified, and what I agree with, because I've lived with it my entire life, is when the stock model of men, which is warrior and provider, is a fairly rigid one, and seldom often changes, and that's to be expected. That's the standard. Anything outside of that is either a bonus or a detriment, but that's the standard, is that you will provide and you will keep me safe. And I can do both, funnily enough. But I don't necessarily look like the kid that can do both. No, well, and I can tap dance at the same time. So, but that gets confusing.
Me too. I can tap dance.
Right.
Awesome.
Hey, right. And
I didn't know that about you, though. That's cool.
Have you not seen the video? Every now and then.
We had these conversations. Yeah, we had these conversations, actually.
Okay.
I need to watch
That's right. Yes, because you're like, I can tap dance, and I'm like, you don't have a video, Jules, so no. So I guess, but what's interesting is I remember that there was, when it comes to toxic masculinity or any toxic gender or any gender identity or gender roles, this is what I find really fascinating. Edward de Bono made a really interesting observation once when he was talking about kids in high school or kids in primary school. And if you watch all the boys, they'll climb the jungle gym and be like, hey, watch me climb, and all this sort of shit. And he made the point that if women didn't value that, the boys would do something else. And this is something that you observe in different cultures. In the US and in somewhat Australia, the norm, extroversion is the norm, whereas in most Asian countries, introversion is the norm. So gender, what's a strong male role model or a classic female role model, is shaped by the society and the family that you're in. So if I'm thinking this through, then would not toxic anything being like not allowing an individual to express themselves, but rather than to conform to the gender role that's been assigned at you by other people? It was, wouldn't that, I don't know. Thoughts?
I mean,
or have I just got like way too philosophical too quickly?
No. See, I like where you're going with it. It's just interesting to me because it raises more questions. It doesn't necessarily give me a place that...
because normally people just go, that's fucking toxic, that's shit, meh. Like, traditional roles is this and this is how it should be for everyone. You're like, no thanks.
No, yeah. No, right. And I'm that guy, right? Like, I don't put me into a fucking box. And number two, don't tell me how to fucking do something. Like, I'll figure it out. I'm going to do that. This is my shit. I'm going to fucking drive. But what it raises for me is there not a similarity? Is there not some sort of basic template that would be the standard for good and the standard for bad, regardless of what environment or cultural upbringing, or is there not some sort of standard that can be?
No, come on, man. I mean, like, too little sugar is as bad as too much sugar. I don't think,
Fair.
I think pick a trait, pick a
Right.
pick a trait, and to some it'll be fine, or it'll be just enough. It'll be the Goldilocks zone. For some, it'll be too much, it'll be too little, or whatever. Jules you're a tall girl, Jules. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you're into axe throwing. So
It makes me seem like this, like, I don't keep going.
So yeah, right. Well, for context, Jules has just been on a date where the guy took her axe throwing, and I'm like, okay. She's like, no, I'm really competitive and I'm in the sport, so that was great. I'm like, awesome, but all right. Look, that at face value, you go, Jules is a tall girl who likes axe throwing.
Would the guy that attracts you not have to be taller and better at axe throwing?
But that's the thing, like, not très feminine, like, not very feminine at all, so how dare you? And what do you mean you're a customer success champion? Like, that doesn't sound like receptionist to me. And when are you having children? Like, Jules?
Yeah. No, I think, are you saying, like, the standards on, like, yeah, like, being a guy that wouldn't go with axe throwing if he's more, like, on the feminine side, you're saying? And so you're saying if they don't, go ahead.
No, I'd argue that, okay, because Brody's point was, are there not maybe common traits of, we'll start with masculinity first, common traits of men and masculinity, with just the right amount of dose that would be universal to everyone. And my argument
that is exactly how I was trying to phrase that.
And I would argue no, because it's different. For me, I would reason that it's different flavors for different people. That's what I would reason.
Subjective. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay. And so, Jules, if you say, like, well, you're more of a fan of traditional role models because that works for you and that is super cool, that's really interesting to me, because one, I know you're a tall girl, and so for some guys, for them, the majority of guys then would find that a little intimidating. Like, you used to be a baller, you're outspoken, you hold yourself well, you're confident. A lot of these traits.
Brady had this conversation.
Right. A lot of these traits would be deemed not so feminine, but B, like, intimidating to a certain amount of men. And if you want to take it that far, you go, well, you shouldn't really be like that, and that's why you're single.
Maybe that's why I'm single.
In the face.
No, but what a ridiculous and absurd and toxic fucking argument to make. And arguably you can make the same rationale with me.
Right.
Like, you're a Renaissance guy, like, good for you, you're building an app and you've got a podcast. Like, you're living in a studio apartment in Sydney. When was the last time you had a relationship? Like, maybe, you should fucking become a lumberjack. I don't know.
No, but I get what you're saying. Because you're saying I kind of fit some of those, like, masculine, role, like, or characteristics in a girl. And so,
heaven forbid, you're just an individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think I don't, it's interesting. I don't know, like, these different terms, like, obviously they came from somewhere, and, like, we have obviously the traditional, like, male is, like, the hunter-gatherer type. They're protective. They they're strong. They're hunters, whatever. And then you got the woman, they were the caretakers. They had kids. They stayed home. Like, that's where this comes from, right? But yeah, I think it fluctuates, but I think maybe it was set that way for a reason. Maybe it worked, and I don't know, but times have changed, right? Like, our society has changed. I think masculine, though, like, we have this visual of, like, what it is, or feminine, but I think it can come down to morals, or, like, characteristics, like, internally too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Okay, and that's yes.
And if I'm reading you, Chris, that's what you're saying, is that it's subjective to the person based on whatever parameters they want to base it off of, but it's subjective too, right? You know?
I would hope so, but that's the thing when we talk about. I'll pick up on something you said, Jules, because it's something that kind of pisses me off.
Oh, dude.
No, in the nicest possible way. It's like Wednesday, we have these traditional gender roles, and we must have had them for a reason because they must have worked. And you go, that's it's sort of like looking back to the 50s and going, remember the good old days, right? And so if we're again, like if we're look, the highest rate of suicide is men between 30 and 45. The end. In Australia, I know that the rate of suicide is 3 times higher than our national road toll. So 3 people will die per day on our roads, and 9 men will choose to end their life successfully. That's not attempts, that's successful suicides, right? And then if we track back, and if you look at mental illness, depression and loneliness, which we talked about, the fact that men die significantly earlier than women, there's a whole bunch of factors around men and masculinity that would suggest that these pure traditional gender roles don't serve them in the best possible way. You know, if I you know, if I have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to provide a lifestyle to a family that I don't see, and then will die earlier than my bride, that doesn't sound like a fun trade-off to me.
No, I think, you know, what's funny is I just read an article on the modern dad, and
Right.
and really the premise of that article was exactly what you're talking about. The gender roles from the past have created the dynamic that we see today, and that's the depression, that's the suicides, that's all this stuff around masculinity. And again, we're not taking men into account. We're taking what men benefit, right?
Yeah.
Society, their families, the thing that they protect, but not men, right? Like, and again, it was a fascinating point, and I'm correlating the two because one of the things that I think it something crazy, 2,500 dads were asked the same question, and it was like 99% of them said the same thing. What is one thing that, what is one of your biggest regrets? And it's time lost with family. Every single fucking one of them. You know what I mean? And that's like you said. But I should be proud, right? Like I'm providing and I'm
Yeah.
fulfilling my role. I should be happy. I shouldn't be sad, you know. But that's not the dynamic of it. And the thing is, I'm blessed, right? I work from home. I get to spend that time with my kids. For instance, we went to the ape caves today out here in Oregon. We explored a cave before I'm sitting down and doing a podcast. Like, take the time, you know, is the biggest thing. But it's like you said, I think if you try to fit that into a mold, you're going to kill all the people that don't fit.
Mm.
And that's sad. That's a rough fucking spot to be.
It
So
is, and I think
do you feel like there's all this pressure to just like work all the time, you know, be the only provider, have all the responsibility, and you think that's, and do you feel like that contributes a lot to why there's more depression now today?
there's there's
Mhm.
way back in season 1, I think it was episode 7 with Gigi, because she's a neighbor of mine, friend of mine, criminal defense solicitor, about in her mid-50s, super cool chick. Her partner is also a solicitor. Anyway, the question I asked her is, when it came to similar sort of topic, was there's an expectation for boys and for men. Is like once when you go through school, like, you know, like it's to get a job and to earn and provide. Like there's no deviation there. You're going to school to do the thing to work. And it's interesting that men's only work is the only purpose for men, where there's work is an option for women. And I said, is that how you found it? Like for Shahan. And she had a different take. She had a more masculine take. She's like, I'm not wired like that. I need to be busy. I want to do things. She's like very driven, very successful. It's a criminal defense solicitor for organized crime, right? So she's not the type to fuck around. So she plays with big bad men all day, every day, and she likes them because they're professional. But
I do remember that.
Yeah, right. And so, look, I'll ask you, Jules. Like, do you see it that way? Because, like, in my personal experience, like, yeah, it was go to school, go to uni, get a job. That's life there in those 3 steps for boys.
Yeah. I don't know if I like see a difference with two genders, I guess, because like I just kind of see that way for myself too. I get the protector, the provider thing for men. I guess I can't speak to like obviously the feelings of that, right? Or like the pressures of that. Because like I'm a woman.
Yeah.
But I do think that maybe that's contributing to it, right? Like I don't know all of those details, but I do think it's like more than that, right? Like I think there's so much with social media that's causing like depression, like I think worldwide, that's just like contributing to that. I also do think though, I think I saw this somewhere online. I did agree with it. I feel like men need like a purpose. And if they don't have that purpose, then I think that contributes like to depression. I would also say like for women too. Like I don't think that's just specific to one gender.
I'd agree, yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of like things with depression though also contribute with society. And I want to bring that up because it's just this constant comparison, right? Like you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. There's timelines that society has for you. And so I think that's probably some of the pressures that guys feel. Like I think women feel with that same way, like, oh, your timeline, you're supposed to have kids at XYZ time.
Your clock's ticking, yeah.
Yep, I got to show every single milestone of the kid that I had just had and what they've achieved and all this stuff. I see this all the time and I'm like, there's no way I'm ever doing that if I have kids. Because I just, we now have this like society where we think we need to share every aspect of our lives or like milestones. And I don't agree with that. But I do think there's benefits of both, right? Because like sharing your journey, is vulnerable and people can learn from you. But yeah, there's just this like highlight reel stuff that I think is the comparison game that's just caused so many people to think it's reality when it's not. Even though it's not reality, it's like almost like it is reality in your head. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm this age and I'm not there. And oh my gosh. And so, yeah, I think that's all that contributes to it too. But yeah, I don't know. I think, I just think part of it's that too. I wouldn't say it's all the pressures of being like a protector.
No, I agree. You mean there's a very, very good point. There's not a silver bullet solution to any of this. That's why we're having the conversation. Now, I'll tell you what is toxic. And Brody, it concerns me because when you go to YouTube and you look up, pro misfits, right? On the homepage, then it'll like spam similar content, right? And because we're 2 guys on a podcast, you get other male podcasts. And the most toxic shit I've ever seen, and I'll stand by this, so feel free to unsubscribe, are these clowns that like blame women and feminism for like all their problems in the world, specifically clowns that take little clipped videos of like this woman finally admits why she's single and regrets her life. And so it might be a TikTok clip
fucking completely out of context.
Clip, well, probably. A TikTok clip of, let's say she's like a single mom in her 30s or whatever, saying like it's hard to meet a guy when you've got a kid and like rah 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 rah. And so they'll take this clip and then use it as their case study to prove that women don't know what they want, and they just like they've wasted all their good years in their 20s by being whores, and now they've got a kid and they're lonely, and isn't this fucking hilarious? You're like, the most toxic immature, just fucking random shit I've ever seen. And what scares me the most, obviously Brody, because they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers more than what we do. And one of them that I stumbled across was actually a podcaster here in Australia, like a young kid who can't be more than like late 20s, and he's posting this sort of shit. And I had seen it similarly from older guys who were like in their 50s and 60s in the States posting exact same content, like mocking women for finally learning the truth about life. Like, what? Tell me what is masculine or even just strong or adult about blaming women for all of your problems?
No, you sound like a crybaby bitch. Yeah, and I mean, even feminism itself too, like which I'm sure will go down that route, but you know, feminism itself too. I think it's funny because at the basis of masculinity and femininity is this conjuncture that they are complementary.
One
Right?
would think, rather than being in opposition.
Right. And this is the
right.
thing. And to Jules' point, I think either side can embody either one. And whatever works for you works for you. And that's what you need to find the fit for. It's interesting that you bring that up because like that's one of my biggest issues. And it's funny that it's connected to our content. But what that tells me is we pop up under their content too. And those fucking assholes that bleed into this community and build this kind of perspective up, they're going to see us too. And you know,
I hope so.
It was so weird that you notched on those boxes earlier for yourself, and it's like I'm sitting here thinking about it, and like if you looked at me, I mean, I guess I'm kind of technically a masculine dude. I'm 6'2". I'm in really great shape. I have a mustache. I talk shit. I'm
You
loud.
do ice baths.
You know, I do ice baths. I fucking go to the gym. I tattoo myself. So
you've got 4 sons. So you've had sex at least 4 times.
At least, you know. So that's it's just interesting. But I wouldn't tag myself even as, you know, the role model that I would want for every single other man out there. And it's like you said, I'm starting to realize that too. There is not one. You would have to find the one for you that, you know, again, subjectively ties into the way you want to be. And I think when we're all operating as we truly believe ourselves to be, that's when we're the best, right? And whether you're masculine or feminine or not, you know, and it's strange because social media, society, the outside pressures, it seems like we're all touching on are the biggest issue there. And it's like, how do you shut the noise down and tune into, again, what makes you you and what really would drive that happiness and that fulfillment that you're seeking, whether that is challenge or whether that is, you know, business or just a happy relationship, stay at home, who the fuck knows, you know? And I think the most ignorant piece of it is those guys too inflate this sense of you can't be out of the norm, right? And that shit's so fucked. Like, how many people are you telling that naturally fall out of the norm that they're not right, they're not that they're not who they should be, or you know, again, falling back to that, if you want to go to those boxes, if you looked at a standard high performing man, right? I'm not that guy. Like, I tattoo myself. I do shit that those guys would look at and be like, "Ah, that's weird, bro. Why don't you just go to the fucking gym?" And it's like, yeah, because I don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, I want to tattoo myself. I want to do these things. It's such a weird conversation because I honestly almost came into this with the notion that you guys would have, you know, your opinions and it would level clarity for me. It's just raised more questions. Just raised more questions. Like, and Chris, I think you said it really well. I mean, you're a clown if you act like you know you've got fucking any of this figured out to the point that you can go preach this to the masses. And then number two, there's just this crazy level of ignorance to assume that you are or aren't what that person or peoples are looking for. You know, like, just a weird thing. I'd rather look in the mirror and ask that guy than some fucking dickhead on social media.
Have you seen this sort of content, Jules? Have you seen these videos?
No, I haven't. I don't really TikTok.
You're lucky.
I saw you don't get TikTok.
Smart.
And I'm with you.
Correct.
On that. I'm not TikToking.
Yeah.
I have enough apps to look at. But I think that whole like scenario is like it just comes down to like take ownership of like clearly that person doesn't really know who they are. Like, you know, they're projecting on someone else with their own insecurities. Like take ownership of who you are. I think this comes down to like, you know, recognizing emotions you have as well, and like no emotions are bad. They're teachers, they're lessons. Like go channel those emotions into something else. And I think that's where guys get in trouble, right? Like they suppress emotions because they think that's what they're supposed to do to be tough. But like it's okay to have emotions. You just need to go channel it into something that makes sense for you, right? Or like understand it how you need to. Um, but I'm just sitting here while
it would be
Brody's
great if we could talk about them.
yeah. Well that
Right.
too. Well, you can do that too.
You know?
That's totally fine too. I feel like I'm like that though. Like I'm like the similar issue, like the suppressing. Like
Yeah.
I
Okay.
feel like that's what I would do too. So I totally can relate to that. But while Brody's talking, I'm like, oh, I don't really fit the feminine like box, right? Like I'm not fitting in the box of like whatever people think is probably feminine. I have feminine qualities in certain areas, but not all. Like I'm definitely more on the like alpha side, right? Like what you said before, like so it's funny. Like I don't think I fit in the box of like the standard feminine whatever that is. I don't know. It's just because we were talking about masculine and we were talking about feminine, like the standards or whatever it is. So I don't think I fit in the feminine one.
Well, while we're here, is there such a thing as toxic femininity? Like, you know, what are...
I just want to say, I think I think you said it well with the masculinity. I think it's the same thing for femininity. I think it's these people that tote gender roles and specificities and deficiencies in the other side of it.
I've got an example.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear it, because I've never really heard that term.
Well, let me float it out there. Like Brody, you might have heard this before, but I'll float it out to the misfits at home. So, folks, this whole concept of, you know, being a high value man, and again, like this, it seems to be something that's preached by and demanded of by women, because like the man that I'm with, for whatever reason, needs to earn X amount, like because the male roles are a warrior and provider, then my man's going to be the provider. He's going to be in the top 1 or 2% of, you know, whatever salary. You know, it's going to be in a high performing field of like law or like fucking real estate or finance or some shit like that. Right.
He's going to be 6'5".
All of that, you know, is going to be 6'5", but want only me, and, you know, go to the gym, you know, complete alpha Chad, because that's what a high value man is. And so, like, in order to be worthy of like a high value individual, like this whole concept, and I have seen some other podcasts where they've asked a panel of girls, and I say girls because they're all in their like 20s or whatever. It's like, what do you think, you know, what's a high value man to you? And like, this is all the stuff they describe. And it's like, okay, sure, let's say you get all of that, but like, what are you going to offer a guy like this?
I think I saw a podcast where like a group of girls were like, he needs to make this. He needs to do X. I think you're probably talking about the same one or something, but yeah, they were.
It's so weird because I mean, maybe I have seen the same one too. But the thing is, in that clip, it was almost that argument was shut down on the other side, where it's like the same thing. It's like, okay, you get to go out and have a high fucking body count. You get to go out and not fucking have a job or a career. You get to go out and do these fucking things and present yourself this way. And I'm supposed to show up as the guy you just described. Fuck yeah. I'm not picking you. Like, and look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be dead honest right here. I wouldn't pick you either. Fuck that shit. You need to go to the club with your girls. You're not my girl. I'm good. You need me to make money for you to feel like you have status. You're not my fucking girl. That we're good, you know? Like, so it was weird, like you said that, but like for me, it's like that's the toxic side of femininity, where it's like you have to be this, and I can show up however the fuck I want.
You know, because I'm worth it. Apparently,
that's the fucking standard. You just got to look a certain way.
but then
That's what
but
the dating
then
apps are. That's what the dating apps are
right.
like insinuating, though.
We talked about that, I think, like 1 or 2 episodes ago, so don't worry,
Yep,
you can check
yep.
all of that out. But I'd reason like anyone that describes their ideal partner by a salary is like, what the fuck? You know, and how does this?
That's super true. Like it's just like it's so like ingrained in us with all of these like visuals that we're always seeing. You can research the whole person before you meet them, like all this stuff, and it's like it's so hard not to judge people on these superficial things when like that's what their whole profile tells me. You know, like it just says like their height, their job, their this. It's like, yeah, it just leaves the door for so much like terribleness to start an interaction. Like it's so bad.
Speculation and then fucking insecurity and comparison and it all fucking
and my real life example is Little Miss High Value, who comes into the cafe. So Jules, you don't know,
she's a reoccurring character.
She is a reoccurring character.
I love your storytelling, by the way. It's just so great.
So for the misfits at home who don't know this story, there was another mum. I think single mum, kind of fit, and I think she was flirting with me at the cafe. And then after she left, Little Miss High Value said, "Oh, there's a little something going on there, Chris." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe, but you know, I think she looks at me as just the coffee boy." Because like I work on the Saturday morning to help out Tom, and I'm currently working there every day because Tom's broken his wrist. So it's sort of hilarious that she would think of me that way, but here we are. Anyway, I said, I think she thinks I'm just the coffee boy. And Little Miss High Value, she's like, well, yeah, because like if she's a high value woman, then like, you know, and her only assumption that the other mum was high value was because she drove a like Mercedes 4-wheel drive, and puts herself together nicely. So again, if you're describing other individuals by what, you know, their material possessions and not as a joke, or not even just like as a little piece of information of like, oh, they must work in something, but like, oh no, they must be better and be of high value, then like, yeah, Chris, you're kind of going to have a hard time. Right. And this was Jules's face for everyone that's listening on Spotify is right. And she said it with a straight face. And I, probably for curiosity's sake, I'm like, what do you mean? And so then she unpacked this whole thing with a straight face of, you know, just how, you know, no. Anyway, but yeah, see this shit. And the irony of it is Little Miss High Value is basically a single mother, even though she's getting married in October in a couple of months. And the guy she's getting married to is a chef. Like,
yeah, so it's the boxes, right? Let's go back to the boxes if you guys want to talk about standards and fucking, you know, this template. That whole situation checks none of them.
That doesn't make sense.
No,
checks none of them.
It's a really interesting case study because she's probably early 30s. She's got a kid that's just turned 1, I think. Partner is a chef. She comes in, Jesus Christ, she was there this morning. She comes in at like 7:30 in the morning. Like she'll run by first with the kid in the pram to do her morning run. So like leggings and all in black and sweating it up and whatever. So she's run by at 7 in the morning. And then she'll be sitting down in the cafe at 8 or 7:30, hair like ironed flat, full makeup, full dress, like everything.
Man, she's productive as hell,
dude. It's but like the local lawyers don't even dress like that at 8 a.m. in the morning. Do you know what I mean? It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. But some people, this girl and all you clowns on YouTube live to this standard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you take it for real and you think this is the way the game is played. You go, bro, like we all know that 1, the marriage isn't going to last past kid number 2, And also she's made it clear that she doesn't want to go back to work because, you know, I'm a mum now and I don't really want to work. And that's where this question came from. Like, men, you have no choice. Men work, whether you're in a relationship or not. Like, that's your function.
Oh yeah, and then it's your failure if you don't. If that relationship were to crumble because of that dynamic, that falls on the man most of the time. That's not the woman being unjust or unfair. That's the fucking man being a pussy. And it's like, dude, what?
And if we really wanted to look at like the values and things of warrior provider, or like having a purpose, let's say, like if that was true, right? I'm not for a minute saying, I'm saying purpose is worthwhile, but it's not, you know, but purpose, surely like having a meaningful relationship in life gives a sense of purpose to somebody, you know. You have a ton of lonely men that fall into the military in every single field because they lack a purpose or a direction or a family structure. For instance,
do you think,
you know,
can I ask a question? Do you think lonely just falls under men though? Do you think like the entire world is just like, we have a lonely crisis in general?
Yeah, look, I would recognize, for all the reasons that you described earlier, that loneliness in general is on the increase. What I find fascinating is, despite all the data that we've had for the last decade, only now has someone sort of raised a flag and gone, hey, men are in trouble. Like, men are in trouble.
When it's at the tip of the fucking iceberg, right? And it just...
Right, but we already have a ton of data. So it's either we've been ignoring it for a whole bunch of reasons because of it's kind of like, well, fuck men, because patriarchy. So fuck him. Or the more toxic argument, which I have actually seen in the comments, is like, well, they've had it good for so long, so who gives a shit? Basically. But again, it's right.
And look, real quick, I want to speak on this. What the fuck do you guys view as men having it good? Again, if we fall back to the example of the 50s, like 90% of the time, dudes at work all the time, busting his fucking body down to the fucking bones, doing all this shit that's not really like that fun, like not great. And like, men have had it so fantastic. And it's like, really? We've beaten ourselves down to fucking jack shit to build the world for the people that tell us that we're not jack shit. All right.
Well, now
we've had it fantastic.
That's a more modern take of like men are trash, like the last 10 or 20 years.
Right.
But yeah. What was it? Loneliness. That's what you asked me, Jules. No, you did. Loneliness. Yeah. And it's widely recognized that apps and social media have contributed to like acute loneliness. So I don't know, are we starting to realize that we can only substitute so much in digital like realms as opposed to actual social environments? You know, because that's the way that humans have been built for a millennia, and there's a lot of value in that, you know. But it's you raise a good point, because my rationale has always been like, none of these things occur in isolation. Like, if you have a bunch of lonely, let's say self-destructive men, that's going to impact everyone around them and the relationships that they have. That includes women. So it might be fun in games to point and laugh at the self-destructive men now, but when it comes your turn, like it's cyclical, and nothing happens in isolation. So we can start to address this holistically, or not, you know. And we can start to address it by not pointing the finger at the other side and laughing. And that goes for you clowns on YouTube who like to look at lonely women and go, isn't this funny? She had it coming. Like, bro, like, what?
Mm-hmm. It's yeah, and it's funny because I know a couple of those guys, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, just through connection and networking and just...
See, and here's the funny thing, and like, Brody, I'm pretty sure we've covered all of this on a podcast. on an episode is like I've had a woman sexually harass me to the point of quitting a job. I had a different girlfriend who was in a relationship for 5 years, abandon me and leave me financially in a hole and steal my dog. I've had there's a series of other things that I could ration off. There's the fact that I'm still single now. You can argue that every relationship I've had has failed. So if there's anyone who would have justifiable right to hate women, it would be me. But somehow I don't. Somehow, the failings of one particular woman or one particular girl at one particular time don't represent the entire gender. Like, is this such a fucking phenomenal concept? Like, I don't, yeah, every single one of you has had an ex that was a bitch. Grow up.
I think,
right.
I think though, it's so easy to blame someone else, right? Because like, if a relationship failed, right? If a relationship failed, like you played a role, right? You're a party in that relationship, so you need to look internally and figure out like where you went wrong, and then you can grow yourself. But I think what you said about that whole Little Miss Value story is, we need to, if I want this person who, exudes this personality and this characteristic and all this, like, I need to look at myself in the mirror and be like, do I show up that way? Right? Like, do I, like, because we even had this conversation. You were talking about, I watched other podcasts, you're talking about height. Well, like, height's a thing for me too. Like, I don't want like a shorter guy. But here's the thing. When I say that, it's like, I would never want a guy to be like, oh, I don't like her because she's not skinny enough or something, right? So it's the same thing. So like,
you're too tall.
You made me check myself, right? So like, I have to think about that stuff too, but I think it's so easy to fall in those traps. I also think, yeah, we're too tall. But I also think, like, what I've really learned about relationships, and when you said about this value thing, I just think it ties into that, what you were saying, and about like ownership. Like, you just got to take ownership of who you are and like what mistakes you've made, and that's how you move forward from relationships. It's not like all guys suck, it's not all girls suck. But like, whatever you want to be or you want, like, show up that same way. Like, that's what you'll attract. Like, you got to build yourself then. You got to work on who you want to be. So
yeah, I agree. And I remember you made a really great point, which I have to mention, because you dropped this in the DMs, I think, only a few days ago. Is like, when
so many DMs.
So many DMs. But specifically when it comes to relationships, right? So if we're looking at masculine and feminine, if we're looking at relationships, Jules made the really excellent point, because she'd gone on like this date with this guy, and all of a sudden, yeah, you had a lot of questions for yourself. Like, holy shit, I'm all of a sudden reflecting on, do I actually want this, and do I actually want him, and what does this actually mean for me? And then you sort of cycle back and you look at your parents and you look at the relationship that they had, and Jules makes the point that if there's one thing like your parents don't really teach you, it's how to have relationships, right? So the primary base of like most connections for most of us is the relationship demonstrated by the parents, but they're never going to, right, like, demonstrated by, but they're never going to articulate the nuts and bolts and the compromise and the communication and the fights and the sex and everything else that goes into like a real fucking
outside of the sex, I do. Right. I've walked my boys through that exact scenario where it may have been a fight, it may have been a disagreement, may have been something where someone was overwhelmed, whatever it is, and it's funny because I think you're exactly right. I think that was one of my biggest problems, was I never understood what was happening. I saw it all. I saw it, but I had to deduce what that meant, and I didn't have the fucking tools. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the scope. So it's a fascinating point. And I think I'm doing it unconsciously, and now with a lot more intent, I'm going to pursue that, because I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of us just did not have the fucking information. You might have had the example, but you did not have the information, and that's tough.
But am I summing up correctly, Jules? Is that what you were getting from it?
So we had such a good conversation about that. I was listening to this podcast, The Diary of the CEO, with Mark Manson. He's the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and some other book too. I don't know if have you read that book?
I've seen it. I've not read it.
Heard of it?
Oh,
yeah.
it's really good. But anyway, he was basically like, it's all about his life, and he was saying like relationships and he went through all these bad relationships with girls, but he was essentially like, I got brought up and I learned a lot about like money management and like how to work hard and achievement and like, just being disciplined and like that part of his life. But then like he felt like he lacked like parents talking about feelings or parents talking about dating or how to navigate relationships. And like he was kind of the weird guy, and so he was trying to always fit in, but like didn't understand his like weirdness and all this stuff. So I thought it was so interesting, because it's like you get to this point in your life where you definitely start reflecting on yourself, and you're like, oh, where did I get up? Why do I do these things? Why do I feel this way? Why do I act this way? Oh, I look back at my parents, right? And like you get a lot of these things from your parents, because that's just, you're looking up to your parents. Parents aren't going to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect if we're parents. Like they're going to lack things. We're going to miss parts. But like, yeah, I think he was basically saying like, I missed the whole like getting talked about feelings, how to navigate relationships. And I was like, I kind of related to that. Like, that's kind of how my grandparents had taught my parents, like, you don't talk about feelings. Like you don't go deep about those things. And like, I think I would have benefited from that. Right. Like, and I'm just like a thinker. I'm a reflector. I like want to understand things. And so it's like, I would have benefited from that, from conversations like that. But I think in general, like, we don't talk enough about like this stuff. And I would just like, maybe other people have like, I feel like I just wish, even in like, I don't know if you do it in schools or where, but like dating, how to even make a friend, like as an adult, how do you navigate how do you navigate dating apps? Hello, that's a whole thing. So
welcome to the Professional Misfits, Julie.
Yeah, I know you guys kind of talked about that. I could talk about that for days, but I just think it's important to navigate those conversations with like your kids, like at whatever point you want, whatever. But yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah. Yes. Beautiful. Any final thoughts, folks, before we wrap up the toxic episode?
I don't have any other final thoughts.
Left me with way more questions than I thought.
Good. That's normally, we seldom come to a resolution. So, but it's important. It is important, I think, to have these. We know it's important to have these conversations, because that's where the actual growth and learning is. And all you guys listening at home, like, you're going to think about it, and you're going to disagree and agree and want to talk it out as well. And that's the most important thing, rather than just, liking and going agree. Nice. So that's episode 10. Brody, do you know what's coming up next?
No. Stop
it. Take a drink every time Brody doesn't know the next episode that's coming up. It's the interval, bro. So we've got nothing to talk about. So we're just going to riff. That's what we do in the interval, because season 2 is 20 episodes long. And so 10 was to get through Talking the Jewels, and 11 is going to be the interval. So we're going to talk about whatever's going on in the Misfits at the moment, and how you're a full-time misfit and all the crazy things. Jules, thanks so much for being here.
This was awesome. You guys are great. I had a blast.
Where can people find you if they want to find Julie Raeder?
You said that beautifully, by the way.
Thanks.
LinkedIn. That's where you can find me.
So it's Raeder, correct? So yes. Julie Raeder, she's a customer success champion, and she's got something like 45,000 followers, which is ridiculous, but okay. But she's a cool chick, and she's tall, and she likes throwing axes. But don't let that, scare you off her. So reach out to Jules. In the meantime, you can listen for free and you can watch us build on YouTube and Spotify at the Professional Misfits. You can get all of the episodes 2 weeks early on Patreon, plus the Misfits doc, plus some merch that's coming up, plus all kinds of other sexy things, plus season 1, the entire video archive. You can get that as well on Patreon. You can find us on the LinkedIn group. You can find us on the Facebook group. Brody, did I miss anything?
Nah, that was beautiful.
Fantastic. Jules, one more time. Thanks for being here. It's been a jam. In the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.